Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and as always, welcome back to another Mortal Kombat video. With the return of Sektor and Cyrax for Liu Kang's new era, I thought that it would be a fun retrospective to do a list video tackling and ranking the top 5 strongest members of the Cyber Lin Kuei. This will be a fun deep dive retrospective that takes us throughout the clan's history from timeline to timeline, with us ranking them according to their skills, abilities, and basically power level. However, going into this, I do have a few rules to really make this list work. Starting off with us only covering the mainline timeline canon characters, as it allows us to rank them within the confines of the established canon, without things getting a little too crazy. This does sadly mean, however, that Cyborg will not be making this list, seeing as, he's kind of a cheat code to at least 4 of the robots, and he functions more as a way to flourish out MKX's variation system, opposed to being a full-blown character here. 2. In order to get this ranking somewhat definitive, I will be ranking each cyborg at the peak of their strength, their strongest point across all 3 timelines here, as it prevents any room for error and does enable to rank them accordingly. And the final rule here, I will not be ranking the newest renditions of Cyrax nor Sektor, because currently, as of making this video, the 2 are yet to make their new era debut. And also, technically, they wouldn't fall into this list anyway, as they are using cybernetic suits instead of having fully undergone the cybernetic procedure. So different take, different rules here. With that said, and the technicalities out the way, let's immediately get right into things. Starting off with arguably the freshest face of the bunch here, Frost. Now mind you, Frost by all intents and purposes is not a new face to the MK franchise, having debuted all the way back in Deadly Alliance. However, Frost as a character has always served as a bit of a companion piece to Sub-Zero. During this time period, the character had finally been elevated to Grandmaster, taking on multiple pupils and disciples. Yet Frost stood out from the rest, as he felt a kinship for his fellow Cryomancer. Sadly, such naivety and hope made it that much easier for Frost to turn on him, something we do see countless times from timeline to timeline. But here's the thing, right? Even once Frost is elevated to that of Grandmaster, having undergone the cybernetic procedure to do so, she would only at best be seen as a thorn in Kuai Liang's side. So why is she at the bottom of this list here? Well, it's pretty easy actually. Whilst Frost has always been a conceptually rich character with a formula for success, Frost's arrogance, self-indulgence, and self-confidence has always largely eclipsed her own skill. Her lack of self-control and discipline has always sown the wedge between herself and Kuai. Because of this, Frost in every timeline has never completed her training or been elevated to her peak. As a matter of fact, she's been known to cut corners in order to acquire this power. The first would be through the Dragon Medallion, and later during Mortal Kombat 11, she would join Kronika, undergoing the Cyber Initiative in order to become its Grand Master, but still lose every single time. All in all, Frost's biggest problems throughout the timeline hasn't been her master or lackluster ability, but simply her own hubris. So her means to her end are nothing more than delusions of grandeur, and that is exactly why she sits at the bottom of the list here. In truth, I do firmly believe that we are yet to see the true potential and the strongest version of this character, but it's simply a path she continues to sabotage. We are merely glimpsing at expectations of potential. Out of all of the characters to feature on this list here, no one quite embodies the phrase skill issue quite like Frost does. Now with Frost out the way, we're on to our next cyborg here, Sektor. A former member of the Cyber Lin Kuei and creator of the Renegade Takunin. Of all of the characters on this list here, Sektor was absolutely the one bound for greatness and success, as he was the son of the Grand Master and the most enthusiastic figure about the Cyber Initiative. So where did it all go wrong for him? Well, while Sektor certainly has the pedigree of a strong fighter, and definitely earned that respect to a certain degree, much like Frost in that regard, his ambitions of grandeur and lust for power has always greatly overreached his skill. He is so power hungry that he even murdered his own father to gain control of the Lin Kuei. Now, in terms of assassination groups, on paper, trial by combat doesn't seem like a bad way to dictate who is worthy to inherit the clan. That is, until you take into account that his father was kind of a fossil and senile to the point of insanity, more or less being one bad hit day away from being 7 feet underground. Thus, it's always been pretty evident that Sektor has always been more of a cunning opportunist. Whilst he is by no means a novice and very talented in hand-to-hand combat, Sektor, unlike his fellow cyborgs, was simply no way near as gifted as them. He wasn't a prodigy or had any supernatural abilities. He lacked the skill and talent to engage in close proximity combat, hence his utilization of militarized warfare to maintain a distance. Because of this, Sektor has unfortunately held a very long persisting losing streak. In fact, the closest thing he ever kind of gets to a W is in MK9, where an exhausted Smoke fights him. Yet even here, Sektor can't finish the bout. So like I said at the very beginning here, Sektor has always, he's had that pedigree to be something so much more. But I think with who I have in the top 3 here, he's simply outmatched and outclassed by them in a lot of different departments. With that in mind though, do not be fooled by his placement. I'd never consider Sektor to be a pushover at all, because the deadliest weapon amongst Sektor's arsenal aren't the flamethrowers or the missiles, but instead his cunning opportunist mind. At number 3, we do have his partner and former brother-in-arms, Cyrax. Now Cyrax has had a pretty strange history throughout the franchise. One that, now I think about it, draws a really important contrast between himself and Sektor. Because Cyrax wasn't entitled to anything upon being brought into the Lin Kuei. There were only 2 paths he could take. One to become an unrivaled assassin, and the second was a swift death. He didn't quite have the privileges that Sektor had growing up, having to fight to really earn his accolades and prestige. Doing so to the point where his talent was undeniable, yet such ambitions would be looked upon in a very twisted way, gaining the gaze and interest of the Grand Master. Along with this, historically, the only time these two have ever clashed was in MK9, with Cyrax victorious. So naturally, it would only make sense for me to put Cyrax above Sektor here. But there's a reason he sits dead center of the list here. And that's because following his release from the Lin Kuei, he just kind of aimlessly floats around in the series. Yes, he's recruited by the Outworld Investigation Agency. However, his interaction with the rest of the cast can only be described as minimal at best. The only notable victory he gets during the 3D era is when he does defeat Cyborg. And I'm gonna be real with you, anyone could kind of get a win over Reptile during this time period of the character. My point is, Cyrax has never had the ability nor the opponent that's really brought out the best in his being, because he's noticeably absent during Deception, and only does cameo, no not like that, during the opening credit sequence of Armageddon, and in the reboot trilogy he's just kind of killed off screen in between 9 to X. Cyrax is just sadly one of those characters that slips in between the cracks of the game's larger narrative. But with what we've seen and what we know of him, we know that Cyrax is a formidable fighter, but he's sadly one that's unexplored, and because of that, never really reaches his full potential. With that in mind though, the next 2 individuals we do have here are what I would say are in a caliber of their own. Now at number 2, we have Tomas Verbada, aka Smoke, aka Enenra. And this is a character who is super unique to the series, because each and every different version of Tomas from timeline to timeline is vastly different to each other. Because of this, we do actually get to see a wide array of his toolkit in each different reality here. Whether that's been as a cyborg, demon, a human, he is equally as dangerous across the board here. But today, we will be solely focusing on his cybernetic form and what made it so unique to the series. Because unlike his Lin Kuei brothers, Smoke has actually undergone two big cybernetic transformations. The first, of course, is the much more familiar outcome, where he's a tragic victim from the Cyber Initiative in MK3, only being freed once he's defeated by Kuei Liang to fight against Sektor and Cyrax. By blending his knowledge of combat, and having no longer been limited to exhaustion or pain, his restoration turns him into an even stronger fighter, being able to go on to defeat the two, with some assistance mind you. Following the events of Mortal Kombat 3 though, Smoke would be temporarily sidelined, until he is brought back in Mortal Kombat Deception, recovered, retrieved, and revived by Noob Saibot. It's here where Smoke would undergo his second transformation. Although still bound to his cybernetic frame, Smoke's very being would now be tainted by the demonic magics of the Netherrealm, gaining a completely new form and deadly abilities like nanotech. So in comparison from the upgrade he had with the Lin Kuei, this was leagues ahead of anything they could have imagined, as it mixed magic with steel. Coming into MK9, this lore would be expanded on in a pretty big way, showing that at a very young age, Tomas became a host for a demon called Nenra, hence his supernatural abilities in game, which in turn kind of elevates his previous form, as the iteration of Smoke we get in 9 is designed to be the same one from the original. Smoke was always going to be placed near the top, having always been one of Earthrealm's strongest fighters. However, the one thing that has him slipping out the top spots here is how anytime he touches something demonic, he more or less completely becomes a side character. Having been paired up with Noob in Mortal Kombat Deception, and in Mortal Kombat X, where he's revived as the Revenant in Nenra, he strictly only appears in cutscenes, not at all physically being playable like some other NPCs. Thus, Smoke has always kind of lacked the ability to shine once he does tap into his full potential. Understandably, it makes him pretty hard to scale and gauge with who I do have at the number 1 spot here. But it's through a character that most certainly deserves it, and you guys already know who it is. Cyber Sub-Zero, an anomaly conjured in this timeline as part of the butterfly effect caused by Raiden's tampering of the timeline. His placement at the top here should be no surprise at all, because Kuei Liang is arguably the greatest Lin Kuei Grandmaster established in the canon. His heritage of cryomancy naturally granted him supernatural abilities. But once you pair that up with Kuei's humility, intelligence, and impeccable skill in combat, you have a near perfect fighter. So, once you strip him of those mortal limitations, like exhaustion, damage, and fatigue, you get a nigh unstoppable force. Yes, he is beaten by Cabal, mind you, but kind of like Smoke in that regard. Once the restraints are off from the Lin Kuei, he gets some massive wins under his belt, defeating Sektor, his ranked superior, a combined tag team of Kintaro and Goro, a former champion of Mortal Kombat, Ermac, are being fused with thousands of souls, and even his own brother turned revenant, Bi-Han. This wasn't really a competition if I'm honest. The only caveat and crux of his placement here is just how small of a role he does play in MK9, only having one chapter before he's reverted back to a human form during MKX. Even so, it cannot be denied the amount of damage and success he achieved for this very brief time as a cyborg. So with that said everyone, this has been it for my top 5 list and ranking. I do hope you have enjoyed this and had some fun, as I'm not really one to do rankings or list videos, but I can't lie, these are pretty damn fun to put together, and allows me to kind of softly pit characters against each other here. I know it's not your typical approach and format of videos from me, but if you guys like it, I'm more than happy to do some more in the future, because I did mostly put this together in celebration for Cyrax and Sektor. With that in mind though, what are your own top 5 cyborgs in the series? What is on your own personal list? Please do comment down below. And hey, if you made it this far into the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It's a small thing, but it goes a really long way. But for now everyone, that's been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting. I'll catch you soon.